We're kicking off with SmackDown, as it was on last week's show that Cody Rhodes accepted Solo Sikoa's challenge for SummerSlam, but the American Nightmare felt the Bloodline's wrath. Not only was Rhodes assaulted, but his longtime friend Randy Orton was taken out in a heinous assault, and Rhodes was on last night's show to address the attack and his upcoming match. Rhodes began by reflecting on Orton's influence on his career and felt guilty watching Orton being put through a table last week before turning his attention to Solo Sikoa. The undisputed WWE champion reminisced on their past ahead of next month's match, but before he could go any further, he was interrupted by A-Town Down Under. After a blame game, Theory and Waller attacked Rhodes and threw him from the ring, but the American Nightmare had backup from boxer Terence Crawford, who was in attendance. Crawford handed him his steel chair, and Rhodes re-entered the ring to fend them off with the attack, standing tall and sending a message to Solo Sikoa. Their SummerSlam match was made official earlier this week, but for SmackDown, Rhodes was granted a match with A-Town Down Under if he could find a partner, and Kevin Owens obliged. Waller and Theory looked to be on the same page despite a lot of friction in recent weeks related to Waller's penchant for leaving his partner high and dry. In the match, Theory and Rhodes started with a basic lockup exchange, but when Owens tagged in, he ended up spending a lot of time in the ring. This was a solid main event that showcased two young stars and two veterans who all seemed to work together, and Rhodes and Owens got the win, delighting the fans. The Bloodline then came out and Rhodes and Owens took the fight to them, but the two were overpowered by Jacob Fatu, who brutally attacked Owens in the ring. Tama Tonga wrapped a chair around Owens' neck and slammed him into the ring post, and the Bloodline then sent Rhodes through the broadcast table, echoing last week's attack on Orton. The Bloodline has a serious problem with Rhodes, Owens, and Orton, and it has become a trend on SmackDown for the Bloodline members to attack at least one of these three men. How the faces will settle the score between the two sides remains unknown, but right now, the only confirmed match between these sides for SummerSlam is Cody versus Sikoa. Given Jacob Fatu's brutal attack on Kevin Owens, WWE might schedule a one-on-one match between these two, or perhaps a tag match with Orton and Tama Tonga thrown in the mix. If so, expect Tonga Loa to also get involved, as during this week's SmackDown, Owens raked his eyes, and after the beatdown, Loa warned Owens it's not over, teasing a future matchup. The Bloodline continues to have the advantage over Rhodes and his allies, and what did you make of the latest run-in between the two sides? Sound off in the comments. We mentioned that Terence Crawford was at this week's SmackDown, but as this was a double taping, he was also available for the show that'll air next week. This is your official spoiler warning for the July 26th SmackDown, so if you don't want to be spoiled, please skip the next 30 seconds. During the taping of the July 26th show, Austin Theory and Grayson Waller were seen in a promo segment with Crawford, and the heels made fun of the boxing star. Waller nominated Theory to take Crawford out, which backfired as the boxer KO'd Theory before posing for the audience as the segment concluded. This will only cause a further divide in A-Town Down Under, and Crawford clearly had a blast at the double taping of SmackDown. As we all know, the Bloodline has a vast family tree with plenty of members competing outside WWE, but another member is set to join the company's programming. Fightful Select reports that Hikuleo, who repped his New Japan run last month by dropping the Strong Tag Team titles, has joined WWE, according to sources inside the promotion. Hikuleo hasn't been seen in action since losing the tag titles, and it was previously reported that his deal with New Japan was set to expire in June, and it was expected he'd be leaving. No specific start date in WWE is known at this time, but Hikuleo's move to WWE follows in the footsteps of his brothers Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa, who joined WWE in recent months. WWE's interest in the sons of Haku was first reported back in January 2023, a fact later confirmed by Hikuleo in an interview, but Vince McMahon's return led to a hiring freeze. That freeze was also in place amid Endeavor's acquisition of WWE and delayed the formal signing of Hikuleo, but the former champion is now under contract. What are your thoughts on Hikuleo joining WWE? Should he join his brothers in the Bloodline, or is a singles run his best option? Share your opinions and predictions in the comments below. Right now, one of the top feuds in all of WWE is between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, but Seth Rollins has inserted himself in the mix ever since Money in the Bank last month. It was Punk's interference that inadvertently cost Rollins the World Heavyweight title in Toronto, and Rollins will have an interesting role to play next month at SummerSlam. WrestleVotes reports that Rollins will be the guest referee in Cleveland for a match between Punk and McIntyre, suggesting that Seth will not compete at the event. Of course, Rollins can only be the referee if the match goes ahead, and right now CM Punk is eager to be medically cleared by WWE's team so that he can wrestle next month. WWE's creative team is working under the assumption that Punk will be ready for action, and it's anticipated he'll be cleared by the Go Home Raw on July 29th. Rollins being a guest referee is certainly not the role many would expect for the former world champion at SummerSlam, and do you think it's the right call? Sound off down below. With the clock ticking, CM Punk has been working hard to get cleared and in ring shape for SummerSlam, and that includes training with some names from TNA Wrestling. On social media, Zachary Wentz shared photos of a training session at Ace Steel's wrestling school in Chicago, which Punk was present for, and shared his admiration for him. Wentz has been one of the names to appear in both NXT and TNA in recent weeks, and will have a crossover match at tonight's Slammiversary pay-per-view. As for Punk, he befriended the TNA roster during his first suspension from AEW, and hopefully this training will all pay off should he be cleared in time for SummerSlam. As we previously reported, Jeff Hardy was stretchered out of the latest episode of TNA Impact after being shoved off the top rope by Johnny Dango Curtis and attacked by the System. At Slammiversary, Matt Hardy will look to gain revenge when he wrestles JDC, but there may be a very important reason as to why Jeff was written off of TV. As explained by PW Insider, Jeff being written off means fans won't expect him at Slammiversary or the subsequent tapings, both of which will take place in Canada. It is believed that Jeff is unable to cross the border due to his past legal issues, and TNA certainly felt that writing him off TV with this attack was the right way to explain his absence. It's unfortunate Jeff Hardy won't be part of Slammiversary, but these are the consequences of his past, and it remains to be seen when we'll next see him on TNA TV. What do you make of this matter? Are you disappointed that Jeff won't be at Slammiversary? Let us know down below. Back to SmackDown, as LA Knight has been hungry for a US title match with Logan Paul, and last week revealed a contract signed by himself and general manager Nick Aldis. The only signature missing from the document was Paul's, and on this week's show, the Maverick appeared with Knight in the ring to make things official. Aldis introduced both the challenger and champion, who wasted no time in firing verbal barbs as Knight reminded Paul that he's one-upped him every time they've met. Firing back, Paul spoke of his supremacy beyond the ring while mocking Knight's 2-decade career, but Knight hit hard, saying Jake Paul is the real fighter and that Logan is a coward. This was enough to get Logan to agree to the title match and sign the contract, and his attempt at a sneak attack only resulted in Knight fighting back and sending Paul into retreat. While this was a fun segment, fans couldn't help but notice that once again, WWE blacked out the screen, which has been a recurring issue in recent weeks. Even though SmackDown's deal with Fox will end soon, the network has grown more conscious about the censoring of the show, even for the smallest issues on screen. On this occasion, Fox blacked out the screen when Paul started his entrance, and while it's unclear why, it appears a fan may have been flipping off the US champion. If that is the reason, the WWE Universe is lucky that Fox wasn't broadcasting Raw and SmackDown in the Attitude Era, as fans feel this censorship has gone too far. If anything, the fan reaction to Paul shows his impact as a heel on WWE TV, and this week, the Maverick reached a huge milestone as the United States Champion. According to WWE stats, Paul is now the longest reigning holder of the gold of the past decade, having surpassed Austin Theory's 257-day reign that began at Survivor Series 2022. Paul has surpassed the likes of Damian Priest's 191-day reign, Sheamus's 182-day reign from May 2014, and Bobby Lashley's 175-day reign that began back in August of 2020. It should be noted that Dean Ambrose's 350-day reign from May 2013 just missed the cutoff, but Paul will no doubt want to break that record as US champion. Since arriving on Raw, the Wyatt Six has targeted Chad Gable, but the Olympian and the Creeds were able to attack Bo Dallas during this week's show. Dallas laughed maniacally as he was attacked before the Wyatt Six emerged, and on Twitter, the group shared a photo of Chad with the words, "There you are," repeated in red. The tweet itself has a string of letters that appear to be gibberish, but when decoded, share the message, "The trust of the innocent is the liar's most useful tool." The theme of lying has been a regular part of the group's message since their arrival, and what do you make of the progress of the Wyatt Six so far? Let us know down below. We've got some Joe Hendry news now, as the Scottish star is proving to be a hit with fans in TNA and NXT, and will compete in the biggest match of his career tonight at Slammiversary. In Montreal, Hendry will be one of 6 men in the elimination match for the TNA World Championship, and there has been a lot of push for him to win the gold from inside TNA. That's according to the Wrestling Observer, as those in TNA can't help but notice Hendry's popularity, thanks in part to his viral antics in and out of the ring. For example, during the weekend of Clash at the Castle, Hendry had billboards with his name appear in Glasgow, which led to his name trending despite not appearing on the show. On the Talk Is Jericho podcast, Hendry recalled getting the billboards and said that his mentor R.D. Evans said that people would respect the balls for him doing this kind of self-promotion. Sure enough, the billboards, which Hendry said was worth the $1,000 cost, only made him more popular with fans. And could this lead him to the TNA World Championship? Time will tell. When not appearing for TNA or NXT, Hendry can be found on the independent scene, and recently had a new song to debut at North Wrestling's latest event. The show saw Elijah, formerly Elias, appear, and he cut a song on Hendry, but the Scottish star had a parody song about the former WWE superstar. Hendry sang about taking Elijah's job as the go-to musician in wrestling, and Joe clearly won this impromptu battle of the bands based off the crowd reaction. Back to SmackDown, as the first match of the night featured 2 guys who stole the show at Money in the Bank, that being Carmelo Hayes and Andrade. They immediately went from 0 to 60 and started trading takedowns and counters at a brisk pace, but the show cut to a break after only a couple of minutes. It's funny that Corey Graves on commentary referenced Andrade being the WWE Speed Champion, a title he isn't allowed to appear with on non-speed shows. Andrade didn't bring his belt, but he did bring his A-game, as did Melo, with this match getting as exciting as some of their spots in the men's ladder match. This display of agility and athleticism saw Melo get close, but in the end, it was Andrade who hit his finisher and got the win. SmackDown saw Bianca Belair make quick work of Chelsea Green in a match that saw Jade Cargill and Piper Niven at ringside backing their respective partners. The EST got the win after countering Green's roll-up with one of her own, and this match went under 2 minutes, as there were some post-match antics to deal with. After the bout, Isla Dawn and Alba Fire appeared on the Titantron and said they were well aware that Jade and Bianca want to regain the women's tag team titles. The champions said they'd give Jade and Bianca a taste of the gold next week, and who would you like to see with the women's tag titles? Sound off below. Nia Jax continued to set her sights on Bayley during SmackDown ahead of their much-anticipated women's title match that'll take place at SummerSlam. In a sit-down interview, Nia promised to dethrone Bayley in Cleveland, but the role model recalled missing her SummerSlam 2017 match because of an injured back. Bayley said it was Nia who'd injured her back and called the Queen of the Ring big, clumsy, and reckless, leaning into criticisms that fans have had with Jax for years. Jax and Bayley were both confident about their chances at SummerSlam before Nia stormed off, ending the interview, but neither woman was done for the night. In singles action, Tiffany Stratton, accompanied by Jax, faced Michin, but Bayley arrived when Stratton was about to hit her signature moonsault. When Jax tried to stop Bayley's distraction, she was sent into the timekeeper's area, and Bayley then attacked Jax with Stratton's Money in the Bank briefcase. Bayley then destroyed the briefcase completely, and all of this gave Michin the opening to get the big win over the buff Barbie. Tensions continue to bubble on the road to SummerSlam, and we'll have to wait to see if it's Bayley, Nia Jax, or indeed Tiffany Stratton who leave as women's champion on August 3rd. Later this month, NXT will host its first of 2 nights of the Great American Bash, as the show will start on July 30th and end on July 6th. Typically, the Bash has been a 1-week event, and in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer explains that the expansion is to keep the ratings from slipping too badly. That's because the Bash will coincide with the upcoming Olympic Games in Paris, France, which are due to begin next week and will dominate the viewing habits for the next month or so. Whether expanding the show to 2 nights can save it from being decimated by the Olympics, that remains to be seen, but expect 2 stacked nights of NXT at the Great American Bash. Next week, WWE will host its first tour of Japan in a very long time, and one of the most beloved WWE names in history will receive a huge opportunity as part of the tour. PW Insider reports that Rey Mysterio will challenge World Heavyweight Champion Damian Priest as part of the show that'll take place in Tokyo. This will be Rey's first world title match in a year, as his previous opportunity came at a live event in July 2023 where he lost to Roman Reigns. This won't be the only world title match, as Cody Rhodes will defend the WWE Championship on all 3 nights of the tour against 3 different opponents. The opening night in Osaka will see Rhodes face Shinsuke Nakamura, while the second night of the tour in Tokyo will see him face AJ Styles. The third night, also in Tokyo, will see Rhodes take on Nakamura and LA Knight, as the fans in Japan are certainly in for some huge matches next week. In January of this year, Bayne finished her time with Stardom, and many felt she'd be joining AEW, especially as she's worked on Dark Elevation, and Rampage. Those appearances came about with Bayne being an unsigned talent, and there had been talks between herself and AEW after becoming a free agent. Now though, things with AEW have taken a turn, as in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, it was stated that Marigold anticipated that Bayne would be joining them for their current tour. That's because Bayne had a verbal agreement to join Marigold and asked to bring Rebecca Scott along, and Rossy Ogawa approved this as he wanted 5 foreign women on the tour. Visas were prepared for both women, but Bayne later informed Marigold of a contract issue with AEW, who likely didn't want a wrestler they're associating with working for Marigold. Marigold never received responses to their inquiries, leading them to assume neither Bayne nor Scott would be joining the tour, despite Bayne not officially being under an AEW deal. It's still unclear if Bayne will ultimately join AEW, as no final decisions have been made, but this was enough to keep her from Marigold's tour. It's no secret that this year is a media rights deal year for AEW, as Warner Bros. Discovery will decide whether to keep AEW content, and if so, how much they'll pay for it. For years, Tony Khan's company has maintained a positive relationship with WBD, and this week, there's been a huge sign that things are going well between the two entities. Fans outside of the US have noticed that AEW content, including pay-per-views, have started being added to Max, and the promotion is listed in the sports stars, and stories genre. This effort certainly suggests that WBD plans on keeping AEW around, and we'll have to see what kind of deal Tony Khan can muster for his first wrestling promotion. What do you make of this? Do you think AEW and WBD should keep working together? Give your thoughts down in the comments section. It was during an episode of Raw last month that Ludwig Kaiser faced Braun Breaker, and it was reported after the match that Kaiser would be out of action with an injury. We've not seen the German superstar in the ring since then, and this week, Kaiser went into detail about this major setback in his career. Speaking with the Metro UK newspaper, Kaiser said that he was already dealing with some soreness stemming from a SmackDown Dark match and then back-to-back live events. Kaiser was not at 100% when he faced Breaker, and he recalled feeling his rib break mere minutes into the match with Braun, and said he struggled to breathe afterward. Despite this, Kaiser fought on for another 10 more minutes despite the injury, and was a part of a post-match angle with Sheamus that likely did his battered body no favors. Kaiser hasn't wrestled since, but is being advertised for dark matches on the SmackDown Before Bash in Berlin, and we're hoping he's recovered in time to compete in his home country. Earlier this month, Natalya signed a new deal with WWE after speculation she'd be ending her lengthy tenure, and we now know more about her situation. According to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, WWE recognized the risk of losing her and made a strong offer to retain her in a move that was made months ago. WWE had actually intended to announce that Natalya had re-signed, but the news surfaced beforehand, and at 17.5 years, Natalya is the longest tenured woman in WWE today. Across the entire roster, only Randy Orton and The Miz have comparable longevity, and do you think Natalya should take some kind of mentoring role backstage? Let us know below. More from Marigold now, as Julia has not had the best of luck in the company so far, as she suffered a wrist injury during the company's first event. Days after her return match saw her lose to Sari, Julia shared that she was recovering from a cold and wasn't ready to run wild in the ring, but that matter has since resolved itself. Now Julia's wrist is healed and she is cold-free, and fans are excited to see what she does in Marigold, as well as her much-anticipated WWE run. For those wondering, Julia joined WWE officially during WrestleMania weekend, and it's expected that she'll be part of NXT moving forward. Julia was even name-dropped by NXT Women's Champion Roxanne Perez this week as anticipation builds towards her eventual debut in the Gold brand. And we're ending with some IT issues, as yesterday a global problem caused a lot of troubles and has affected a lot of shows that were set to happen this week. Thousands of flights were grounded on Friday due to the global tech disaster that affected government agencies and businesses and resulted in passengers being stranded. Medical procedures were canceled and 911 services were disrupted, and while this was not a security incident or cyber attack, the issue affected airlines, banks, and agencies worldwide. By Friday afternoon, over 2,700 flights in the US had been canceled and 9,000 delayed, and this had impact in wrestling as GCW announced changes to their weekend shows due to the chaos. TNA Slammiversary is set to happen tonight, as is AEW Collision in Arlington, and we'll monitor this situation for any delays related to these problems right here at Slat Rock Wrestling.